Chloe Mercer had spent 117 nights on Chicago's streets, learning the hard way that staying invisible kept you alive. She had learned to walk without sound, to sleep with one eye cracked open, to read a stranger's intentions from 20 feet away by the way they held their shoulders. She had learned that hunger was something you could push past if you breathed slow enough, and that cold was just pain wearing a different mask. She had learned all of this at 13 years old, and she carried every lesson like a scar etched into skin that nobody bothered to look at twice. But the night she threw herself in front of 3 bullets meant for a biker's 8-year-old daughter, invisibility shattered like glass. And so did every rule she had ever made to survive. The moment her body hit the pavement and blood pooled beneath her, she was not a forgotten girl anymore. She was a girl who had chosen to be seen at the exact second it could cost her everything. The day had started like all the others. Gray, cold, measured in small victories that added up to nothing more than another rotation of the sun. Chloe woke before dawn under a loading dock near an old textile warehouse on Chicago's south side. Her jacket was damp from the night's drizzle. Her stomach folded in on itself from a hunger that had become background noise months ago, a dull ache she had stopped naming because naming it made it louder. She was 13, though the streets had carved years into her face that did not show up on any birth certificate or school record, collecting dust. Somewhere in a file cabinet, nobody opened anymore. Her blonde hair hung too long over her eyes, tangled and unwashed, tied back with a rubber band she had found in a parking lot 2 weeks ago. Her jeans were 2 sizes too big, cinched at the waist with a piece of rope from behind a hardware store. Her sneakers had holes worn through the soles that let in every puddle, every gust of cold wind, every reminder that she was one bad winter away from something she did not like to think about. She did not have a plan beyond the next meal. Planning further than that felt like a luxury reserved for people who had roofs and addresses and someone who cared whether they came home at night. Chloe had none of those things. What she had was a sharp instinct for danger, a memory that never let her forget the faces of people who might hurt her, and a quiet stubbornness that refused to let the city swallow her whole. Her mother had died 14 months ago, ovarian cancer, the kind that moves fast and takes everything with it. Chloe had been 11 when the diagnosis came, 12, when her mother stopped getting out of bed, and 12 and a half when the hospital called to say it was over. Her father had left before she was old enough to remember his face. No forwarding address. No phone calls on birthdays, just a name on a birth certificate and a space in her life shaped like an absence she had stopped trying to fill. After her mother died, the state stepped in. 3 foster homes in 14 months. The first was overcrowded, 5 kids sharing 2 bedrooms, a guardian who drank boxed wine by noon and counted heads at dinner like inventory. The second was quieter but colder, a couple who treated fostering like a tax strategy, who locked the pantry at night and never asked Chloe how she was doing. The third was the worst. A man who looked at her in ways that made her skin crawl, who stood too close in hallways, and whose hand lingered too long on her shoulder when he said goodnight. She left that house through a window at 2 in the morning and never looked back. 4 months on the street since then. 4 months of learning that the system designed to protect kids like her was just another kind of cage with different locks. By mid-morning, Chloe had made her way to the usual spots. She checked behind the grocery store on Halstead for day-old produce tossed into bins. She scanned sidewalks for dropped change, head-down hands in pockets, avoiding eye contact with anyone who looked like they might ask questions or call someone unofficial. She collected enough returnable cans by noon to scrape together $2.15, which bought her a gas station hot dog and a bottle of water at the corner mart, where the clerk had stopped caring enough to chase her off months ago. She ate slowly on a bench near the bus depot, making the food last, watching the city move around her like she was a stone in a river. People flowing past with phones and coffees and coats that looked warm, with places to be and people waiting for them. Nobody looked at her. That was the whole point. The more invisible you were, the less trouble found you. The less people remembered your face when something went wrong nearby. A woman walked past holding a little girl's hand. The girl was maybe 5 or 6, wearing a puffy pink coat and rain boots with cartoon frogs on them. She was laughing about something, swinging her mother's arm, and the mother smiled down at her like the world was a good and gentle place. Chloe watched them until they disappeared around a corner. Then she looked down at her push dog and took another small bite and told herself it did not hurt to watch things like that. that she was past the point where watching other people's happiness could wound her. She was lying, but she had gotten very good at lying to herself. It was the only skill the streets had given her that actually made the days shorter. By late afternoon, the hunger returned sharper this time. Chloe's body had stopped trusting that food would come regularly, so every meal felt like the last one, and every empty stretch afterward felt longer, heavier, more insistent. She tried to ignore it, tried to distract herself by walking, counting steps, reciting the state capitals her mother had taught her during long car rides that felt like they belonged to someone else's life. But her feet eventually carried her toward the industrial district on the city's western edge, a place she had been a handful of times before when desperation outweighed caution. There was a garage back there tucked between a shut-down machine shop and a lot full of rusted shipping containers stacked like forgotten monuments. The garage itself was not abandoned, but it was not the kind of place that kept regular hours or welcomed walk-ins. Motorcycles were usually parked out front, heavy machines with chrome that caught the light and leather saddlebags that told you more than words ever could. Chloe had learned to read the symbols stitched onto jackets the way other kids learned to read street signs. They all said the same thing: stay away, do not ask questions, do not make yourself memorable. But the dumpster behind that garage sometimes had food. Leftover takeout containers, half-eaten sandwiches wrapped in foil, once an entire box of donuts that someone had apparently decided they did not want. Not often, but enough times that it was worth the risk when her stomach hurt badly enough to override her better judgment. She kept her head down as she approached, hood pulled up, hands shoved deep into the pockets of her oversized jacket. The area was quiet in that particular way that made your shoulders tense without knowing exactly why. A few bikes sat outside the garage, their chrome catching the fading light of a sun that had already given up on the day. Voices drifted from inside the building, low, relaxed, the kind of conversation that came with beer and old stories. Chloe moved carefully around the side, aiming for the narrow alley that led to the back. She had done this before, in and out, quick, quiet, invisible, 3 minutes tops. The alley smelled like motor oil and old asphalt with a faint metallic tang that clung to the back of her throat. Her eyes adjusted to the dimness as she scanned for the dumpster against the far wall. That was when she heard it. Raised voices, sharp, angry, coming from the front of the building, cutting through the low hum of evening quiet like a blade drawn across glass. Chloe froze. Every instinct she had cultivated over 4 months of street survival screamed at her to turn around and disappear. This was not her business. Getting involved in someone else's trouble was how kids like her ended up in worse situations than hunger. Rule number 1, stay invisible. Rule number 2, walk away from anything that is not your problem. But then came another sound slicing through the night in a way that bypassed every rule and every instinct and went straight to something deeper. Something she thought the streets had beaten out of her months ago. A child's scream, high, terrified, desperate in a way that made Chloe's chest tighten like a fist had closed around her heart. Daddy, Daddy, please. Chloe's heart slammed against her ribs so hard she could feel it in her teeth. Her feet stayed rooted for half a second. Logic and fear wrestling with something primal, something that lived in a part of her brain that did not care about rules or survival or the cold mathematics of risk. Then she moved. She edged toward the corner of the building, keeping low, staying pressed against the brick wall, peeking just enough to see what was happening without stepping fully into view. What she saw made her blood turn to ice. A dark sedan had pulled into the lot at an aggressive angle, boxing in a pickup truck near the garage entrance. Its engine was still running, headlights cutting harsh white lines across the cracked pavement. 2 men in dark jackets had a third man pinned hard against the hood of the truck. His arms wrenched back at painful angles, a gun pressed firmly into his ribs. The pinned man was big, broad-shouldered, covered in tattoos that ran up his neck and disappeared under his shirt collar. Even from this distance, Chloe could see the fury carved into his face, the way his muscles strained against the hands holding him, the raw desperation in his eyes that looked nothing like anger and everything like fear. 10 feet away near the passenger side of the truck, another man was dragging a little girl out by her wrist. She could not have been more than 8 years old. Blonde hair pulled into a ponytail that had come half undone, a pink jacket with a cartoon butterfly stitched on the back. Small sneakers with light-up soles that flashed uselessly as she tried to pull away, her feet slipping on the wet pavement, her whole body shaking with sobs so deep they seemed to come from somewhere below her ribs. Let her go. The man pinned to the truck roared, his voice breaking with a kind of fear Chloe had never heard from an adult before. It was the sound of someone watching their worst nightmare unfold in real time, watching it happen inches away and being powerless to stop it. I swear to God, you touch her, and there is no hole deep enough for you to hide in. The man closest to him sneered, pressing the gun harder into his side. You are done, Reaper. This is what happens when you think you can walk away clean. Strand says you owe a debt, blood debt. You do not get to quit. You do not get to play house and pretend the life does not follow you home. The name hit the air like a crack of lightning. Strand. Whoever that was, the name carried weight. Chloe could see it in the way the pinned man's face changed. Not fear exactly, something worse. Recognition. The understanding that this was not random. This was personal. The man dragging the little girl raised his own gun, not quite aiming it at her yet, but close enough that the threat hung in the air like smoke from a fire that had not fully caught. Stop fighting, kid, he muttered, yanking her harder as she twisted and clawed at his hand. Make this easy, and maybe you get to see your daddy again. She screamed again, louder, her voice cracking under the weight of terror no 8-year-old should ever have to carry. Daddy, Daddy, help me, please. The pinned man's roar tore across the lot, raw and desperate, the sound of love turning into violence because it had no other outlet. Sophie. Sophie, look at me, baby. It is going to be okay. I promise. Just look at me. Look at Daddy. But the promise was drowned out by the metallic click of the gun being cocked. Chloe did not think. Thinking took time she did not have. Thinking meant weighing odds, calculating risks, remembering that she was just a skinny, homeless girl with no backup, no phone to call for help, no weapon, and no reason to get involved in something that could get her killed for nothing except doing the right thing. But all she saw in that moment was a little girl with a butterfly on her jacket and light-up sneakers, terrified and crying, with no one between her and a man who did not care if she lived or died. And something inside Chloe snapped. Not broke. Snapped, like a wire pulled too tight, finally releasing, and all the energy it had been holding flooded through her body at once. Her feet were already moving before the decision fully formed in her mind. She burst from the alley, sneakers pounding against the pavement, arms pumping, heart hammering so loud it drowned out everything else. The shouts, the engines, the voice in her head telling her this was suicide, that this was not her fight, that nobody had ever done this for her, and she owed the world nothing. The man holding Sophie twisted at the sound, eyes widening in confusion, and then alarm guns swinging toward the blur coming at him from the side. What the hell? Chloe did not slow down, did not hesitate, did not think about what bullets would feel like, or whether anyone would remember her name after this, or whether the world would even notice another dead homeless kid on the evening news. She threw herself forward, arms out, body angling between the gun and the girl. She grabbed Sophie's jacket with both hands and pulled the child behind her, shielding her with the only thing she had left to give. Her body. The first shot was louder than anything Chloe had ever heard. Louder than thunder. Louder than the time a transformer blew on the block where she had been sleeping. It punched into her left shoulder with the force of a sledgehammer, spinning her halfway around. White-hot pain exploded through her entire side, so sudden and absolute that her vision went white at the edges. The second hit lower just below her ribs on the right side, stealing the air from her lungs in one violent gasp. Her legs wobbled, but did not give out yet. She could still feel Sophie pressed against her back, could still feel the little girl's hands gripping her jacket, could still hear the child's screams mixing with the ringing in her ears. The third shot, she did not even feel where it landed. Everything blurred into heat and sound and the sensation of falling in slow motion. The world tilted sideways as gravity remembered she existed. Her knees buckled. The concrete rushed up to meet her, cold and unforgiving. She hit hard, the impact jarring through bones that were already screaming. Her hands pressed against the pavement, slick with something warm and spreading fast. She tried to hold herself up, tried to keep her body between Sophie and the guns. But her arms had no strength left, and she folded forward, cheek pressed against the wet ground, staring at nothing. Somewhere beyond the roaring in her ears, beyond the sharp ringing that made it hard to think she heard Sophie scream. Not words, just sound, pure terror. The kind of sound that should never come from a child. She heard the pinned man's voice crack in a way that made the whole parking lot feel smaller and sharper and more real than anything Chloe had felt in months. Sophie, get back. Get in the truck, now. Tires screeched, doors slammed, the sound of the sedan peeling out into the night, its engine roaring as the men realized the situation had spiraled beyond their control. Gunshots brought attention they could not afford. Whatever message they had come to send had been interrupted by a girl who was not supposed to be there. Chloe's vision flickered. Dark spots crowded the edges, closing in like curtains being drawn at the end of a show nobody had watched. She tried to move, tried to see if Sophie was okay, but her body would not respond. Her hands slipped in the blood, pooling beneath her warm and wrong, and spreading wider with every heartbeat she had left. Footsteps pounded toward her, heavy boots hitting concrete fast and hard. Then a man's voice, rough and shaking in a way that did not match the size of the person it belonged to. Kid. Hey kid, stay with me. You hear me? Stay with me. Chloe blinked up at the face above her, tattooed, bearded, eyes wide with something that looked like shock and fear and gratitude, it all tangled together into an expression she could not quite read through the fog closing in around her. Dominic Gallagher dropped to his knees beside her. His hands pressed hard against her chest, trying to slow the bleeding, trying to hold together something that was coming apart too fast. His palms came away red and he pressed harder. His jaw clenched so tight the muscles in his neck stood out like cables. Sophie, get in the truck now. Lock the doors. But Daddy, she is hurt. She is bleeding. Daddy, there is so much blood. Now, Sophie, do what I say. Small footsteps ran fast and stumbling across the pavement. A truck door opened, then slammed shut. The click of a lock echoing in the sudden quiet. Dominic's phone was already at his ear, his voice tight and controlled in a way that suggested he had done this before. That this was not the first time he had knelt beside someone bleeding out on concrete and made a call that meant the difference between life and death. I need an ambulance. Industrial Strip 4th and Halsted. Gunshot wounds. 3, maybe more. She is a kid. She is bleeding out. Hurry. Chloe tried to speak. Tried to ask if Sophie was safe. If she had done enough, if any of it mattered. But all that came out was a wet cough that tasted like copper and salt and something she knew she should be afraid of, but did not have the energy to fear anymore. Do not you dare, Dominic said, his voice dropping low and steady. Almost a command, almost a prayer. You hear me, kid. You do not get to die for my daughter and not stick around to meet her properly. You do not get to do something that brave and then check out before I can thank you. Chloe's lips moved, forming words that did not have sound behind them anymore. Dominic leaned closer, his ear near her mouth. What? What are you trying to say? Is she okay? Chloe's voice was barely a whisper, barely there at all, a breath shaped into syllables that cost her more effort than running toward those guns had. She is safe, Dominic said, and something in his face changed, softened. The hard edges of a man who had spent years building walls around himself crumbled just enough for Chloe to see something raw underneath, something that looked like it might break him if he let it. Because of you, he said. You hear me? She is safe because you did not walk away. Chloe wanted to say something else, wanted to ask why it mattered, why anyone would care, why this felt different from every other moment in her life where people looked past her like she was furniture, like she was a problem that would solve itself if everyone just ignored it long enough. But the darkness was pulling her under faster than she could fight it. The edges of the world went soft, then gray, then black. The last thing she heard before everything disappeared was the distant wail of sirens growing louder, cutting through the night like a promise she did not dare believe, and Dominic's voice low and steady, repeating the same words over and over like a lifeline thrown into deep water. Stay with me, kid. Just stay with me. Come on. Breathe. Stay with me. Then the world disappeared and Chloe Mercer fell into a silence deeper than any alley, any street, any night she had ever known. Waking up felt like clawing through layers of thick fog, each one heavier than the last. Chloe did not know where she was at first. Just that everything hurt in ways she did not have words for, and that somewhere nearby machines were beeping in steady, relentless rhythms that measured something she could not name. Her eyelids felt like they had been glued shut. When she finally forced them open, The light was too bright, too clean. Nothing like the dim corners and shadowed alleys she had grown used to. White ceiling tiles, fluorescent strips humming softly overhead. The sharp, sterile smell of disinfectant mixing with something medicinal that made her nose itch. A hospital. Panic hit her before full awareness did. Hospitals meant questions. Questions meant social workers. Social workers meant the system. The system that had shuffled her between 3 foster homes in 14 months before she decided sleeping outside was better than sleeping in places where people looked at her like a paycheck or a problem. Or worse. She tried to sit up and pain exploded across her chest and shoulder, white hot and immediate. A gasp tore out of her before she could stop it. Hey, hey, easy. A woman's voice, calm but firm, came from her left. Do not move too fast. You have stitches in places you really do not want to tear open. Chloe turned her head slowly and saw a nurse standing beside the bed. She had kind eyes, the sort that made Chloe want to trust her and run at the same time. Where am I? Her voice came out rough like she had swallowed gravel. Northwestern Memorial, the nurse said, adjusting something on the IV line running into her arm. You have been out for about 18 hours. You are lucky to be awake at all, honestly. 18 hours. Chloe tried to piece together what had happened, but everything after the third gunshot was a blur of pain and voices and darkness and the feeling of falling that had no bottom. The girl, she said, suddenly trying again to sit up despite the pain. Is she okay? Is she hurt? She is fine, the nurse said quickly, gently pressing Chloe's shoulder back down against the pillow. Because of you. The little girl you protected did not get a scratch. Her father has been here the whole time. He has not left that hallway since they brought you in. Chloe blinked, trying to process that. He is still here. Has not budged, the nurse confirmed with something soft in her expression. And there is a little blonde girl who keeps sneaking past the nurse's station to leave you drawings. We have got about 6 taped to the wall over there. Chloe turned her head the other way, wincing at the pull in her neck. Sure enough, a small collection of crayon drawings decorated the wall beside the window. Stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. A house with flowers in the yard and a door painted red. A wobbly thank you surrounded by hearts and stars, the letters uneven but careful. The kind of writing that came from a child who had taken her time because she wanted it to be perfect. Something tight and unfamiliar twisted in Chloe's chest. Not pain from the wounds. Something deeper. Something that had been locked away so long she had almost forgotten it was there. The nurse checked the monitors one more time, then gave Chloe a small smile. I will let him know you are awake, she said. He made me promise the second you opened your eyes. She left before Chloe could argue, the door swinging shut with a soft click. Chloe stared at the ceiling, heart beating too fast for someone who was supposed to be resting. Her mind raced through scenarios. What she would say, what questions she would get, how quickly she could leave before someone official showed up and started asking things she did not want to answer. Whether the window opened, whether she could walk, whether there was a way out of this room that did not lead straight back into the system she had spent 4 months running from. The door opened again a minute later, and Chloe turned her head to see the man from the parking lot step inside. Up close, without the chaos and the blood and the guns, Dominic Gallagher looked different, older, tired in a way that went deeper than lack of sleep. It seemed to live in his bones and behind his eyes. His leather jacket was gone, replaced by a faded gray Henley that showed the tattoos crawling up his forearms and disappearing under rolled sleeves. His beard was trimmed but still heavy, streaked with gray, that he clearly had no interest in hiding. His eyes, dark sharp, ringed with the kind of shadows that came from sitting upright in a hospital chair for 18 hours, locked onto Chloe the second he crossed the threshold. He did not say anything at first, just walked over to the chair beside the bed and sat down heavily. Elbows resting on his knees, hands clasped together like he was trying to figure out where to start. Like the words he needed had not been invented yet, and he was going to have to build them from scratch. Finally, he spoke. You got a name, kid, Chloe hesitated. Habit. Names were information, and information was currency on the streets. You did not give it away for free. But something in his voice, in the way he asked, not like an interrogation, but like he genuinely needed to know, made her answer. Chloe, she said quietly. Dominic nodded slowly, like he was filing that away somewhere important, somewhere it would not get lost. Chloe, he repeated. I am Dominic. Most people call me Reaper, but you can call me whatever you want. Another stretch of silence. Not uncomfortable exactly, but heavy with things neither of them knew how to say yet. The kind of silence that happens between two people who have shared something enormous and are still trying to figure out what it means. I have been trying to figure out, Dominic said finally, his voice low and rough, like the words were being dragged out of somewhere deep. Why a kid I have never seen before in my life would throw herself in front of 3 bullets for my daughter. Chloe swallowed throat dry despite the IV dripping fluids into her arm. I do not know, she said honestly. I just heard her screaming, and I could not. She stopped searching for words that did not sound stupid or naive or like something a 13-year-old would say in a movie. I could not just walk away. I tried to think of a reason to, and I could not find one fast enough. Dominic stared at her for a long moment, something shifting behind his eyes, something heavy rearranging itself. Most people would have, he said quietly. Most grown adults with training and weapons and backup would have. But you did not. Chloe did not know what to say to that, so she said nothing. She had learned a long time ago that silence was safer than the wrong words. Dominic leaned back in the chair, exhaling slowly. Sophie has not stopped talking about you, he said. The hardness in his face cracked just slightly, and underneath it was something that looked almost like a smile trying to form. Keeps asking when the girl who saved me is going to wake up. Keeps drawing you pictures. Keeps telling me I have to make sure you are okay. She is 8. She does not really understand what you did, but she knows it mattered. Is she really okay, Chloe asked. Not a scratch, Dominic confirmed. Scared out of her mind for 3 days, but physically fine. Thanks to you. The weight of those 2 words landed heavier than Chloe expected. Thanks to you. Like they carried something she had never been offered before. Something she did not know how to hold. Dominic leaned forward again, forearms on his knees. I need to ask you something, Chloe, and I need you to be straight with me. Chloe tensed. Here it comes. You got family? Dominic asked. Parents, guardian? Somebody who has been looking for you? She looked away, stared at the machines instead of the man. The beeping was steady and neutral, and asked nothing of her. No, she said quietly. Not anymore. Not anymore, Dominic repeated, catching the phrasing. What does that mean? Chloe's jaw tightened. It means my mom is gone. Cancer. Dad left before I can remember. Foster care did not work out. I have been on my own for a while. How long is a while? 4 months, Chloe admitted. Give or take. Dominic was quiet for a beat. You are 13, he said. Not a question. Chloe nodded. And you have been living on the streets for 4 months. Another nod. Dominic rubbed a hand over his face, exhaling hard through his nose. Why did you not go back to the system, to someone who could help? Because they do not help, Chloe said, her voice sharper than she meant it to be. They move you. They file paperwork. They put you in houses with people who do not know your name and do not care to learn it. The last place they put me was not safe. I left, and I am not going back. Dominic just nodded slowly, his eyes steady on hers. Yeah, he said quietly. I get that. Chloe blinked, caught completely off guard. Of all the responses she had prepared for, understanding was not one of them. Dominic shifted in his chair, his expression hardening into something more resolved, like a decision had been made and he was simply catching up to it. Here is the thing, Chloe, he said. You took 3 bullets for my kid. I do not care what your situation is. I do not care what your file says. I do not care if you have got nobody in the world looking for you. I do not forget debts like that, and neither does Sophie. Chloe's chest tightened. I do not want anything, she said quickly. I was not trying to. I am not asking what you want. Dominic interrupted, voice firm but not unkind. I am telling you what I am offering. You need a place to stay. You have got one. With me and Sophie. For as long as you want it. The words hung in the air like something fragile and impossible. Like a bridge made of glass stretching across a canyon she had been staring into for months. You do not even know me, Chloe said. I know enough, Dominic replied. I know you are a kid who had every reason to walk away from a nightmare and did not. I know you put your body between my daughter and a gun until you could not stand anymore. That tells me more about who you are than any background check or case file ever could. What about the police, she asked. They are going to want to know what happened. Let them, Dominic said. I will handle it. You tell the truth. You heard a kid screaming. You acted. That is all they needs to know. And after Chloe pressed, when they find out I ran from foster care, when they try to send me back, Dominic's jaw tightened. Then we deal with that too. But I am not letting you get shuffled back into a system that already failed you 3 times, not after what you did. Why, Chloe asked, voice barely above a whisper. Why do you care? Dominic was quiet for a moment, choosing his words. Because somebody should have cared a long time ago, he said finally. And nobody did. And because my daughter asked me to make sure you were okay. And when Sophie asked me for something that matters, I do not say no. Before Chloe could respond, the door opened again and a small figure slipped inside. Sophie. She was still wearing the pink jacket from that night, though someone had cleaned the dirt off it. Her blonde ponytail was neater now, tied with a ribbon that had little stars on it. She clutched a stuffed bear in one hand and a folded piece of paper in the other. She stopped just inside the door, eyes wide, staring at Chloe like she was something magical and fragile all at once. Daddy said you were awake, she said softly. Dominic turned. Sophie, I told you to wait outside. I know, she said, stepping closer on careful feet, but I wanted to see her. She walked up to the side of the bed and held out the piece of paper. I made you another picture, she said. It is you and me. We are holding hands because you saved me. And there is a sun because I want you to always have sunshine now. Chloe took the paper carefully, her hands still shaky. The drawing was simple but deliberate. 2 stick figures, one taller than the other, standing under a bright yellow sun. The taller one had long hair and a big smile. The smaller one had a ponytail and was holding her hand. Between them in wobbly letters, it said, Sisters. Something in Chloe's chest cracked open. Not broke. Cracked open. Like a door she had sealed shut so long ago, she had forgotten there was a room behind it. Thank you, she managed. Her voice did not sound like her own. Sophie smiled wide and genuine and completely unguarded. Then she looked at her father. Can she come home with us? She asked. When she is better. Dominic glanced at Chloe, then back at his daughter. We are working on it, sweetheart, good Sophie said firmly. She turned back to Chloe. You can have the room next to mine. It has a window that gets the morning sun, and I will share my stuffed animals with you if you want. And we have a kitchen with food in it all the time. You can eat whenever you want. That last sentence, spoken with the casual innocence of a child who had never gone hungry, hit Chloe harder than any of the bullets had. She did not trust herself to speak, so she just nodded, blinking fast. Sophie reached out carefully and patted Chloe's hand gently. I am glad you did not die, she said seriously. Daddy said you almost did, but you did not. So now you get to stay. Sophie, Dominic started. It is okay, Daddy, she said. She needs us, and we need her, because she is brave. Before anyone could say anything else, the door opened again, and this time it was not a nurse. A man in a dark suit stepped inside, badge clipped to his belt. Behind him, a woman in business casual carrying a tablet and a folder thick enough to suggest she had done her homework before arriving. The man's eyes swept the room, landing on Chloe, then on Dominic, then on Sophie, cataloging everything. Chloe Mercer. The man asked, his tone professional but careful. Chloe's stomach dropped. Every muscle in her body tensed. I am Detective Harlan, the man continued. This is Miss Prescott from Child Protective Services. We need to ask you some questions about what happened 3 nights ago. Dominic stood slowly, positioning himself slightly between the detective and the bed. She just woke up, Dominic said, voice even but firm. She has been through hell. Can this wait? I am afraid not, Miss Prescott said, her tone clipped and practiced. Chloe is a minor with no legal guardian on record. She has been missing from state custody for 4 months. We have protocols. Chloe's hands clenched the blankets so tight her knuckles turned white. The detective glanced at Dominic, then at Sophie, then back at Chloe. We just need to understand what happened, he said, and then we will figure out next steps. Miss Prescott stepped closer, her eyes sharp behind glasses that made her look older than she probably was. Chloe, can you tell us where you have been staying? Who you have been with? Chloe opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her throat had closed. Dominic's hand landed gently on Sophie's shoulder. Sophie, go wait outside with Uncle Briggs for a minute. But Daddy, now baby. Sophie hesitated, then squeezed Chloe's hand one more time. Do not let them take her away, she said to her father. Then she walked out, pulling the door shut behind her. The detective pulled out his notebook. Miss Prescott adjusted her tablet. And Chloe realized that the hardest part of this was not surviving 3 bullets. It was surviving what came after. The hospital room felt smaller with 5 people in it. Detective Harlan stood at the foot of her bed with a notebook open. Miss Prescott positioned herself near the window. Dominic had not moved from his spot beside Chloe's bed. Arms crossed, jaw set, Detective Harlan clicked his pen. "Let us start simple," he said. "What were you doing behind that garage? I was looking for food," Chloe said quietly. "In the dumpster." Miss Prescott's pen scratched across her tablet. "You were alone?" the detective asked. "Yes." "And you heard what exactly?" "Shouting. A car pulling in fast. Then I heard a little girl screaming for her dad, and I went to see what was happening. And when you saw what was happening, I saw men with guns. One of them had Sophie. The gun was pointed close to her. I could not stand there, so I did not." Detective Harlan nodded slowly. "You threw yourself between an armed man and a child you had never met. That is either very brave or very reckless." "Does it matter which?" Chloe asked. Dominic almost smiled. Miss Prescott stepped forward. "Chloe, according to our records, you were placed with a foster family in August. You left that placement in early September without authorization. You missed 2 court dates and a mandatory check-in. That makes you a runaway in state custody." Chloe looked down at her hands. "I know. Then you understand that we have an obligation to return you to appropriate placement." "She is not going back," Dominic said. Miss Prescott turned to him. "Mr. Gallagher, with all due respect, that is not your decision." "She saved my daughter's life," Dominic said, each word landing like a stone dropped into still water. "She took 3 bullets doing so. I am not letting her get sent back to a system that already failed her 3 times." "The system did not fail her," Miss Prescott replied. "She failed to comply with her placement. Her last placement had a guardian who should not have been anywhere near children," Dominic said. His voice was quiet, but it carried an edge that made the temperature in the room drop. "I made calls. I did my homework. Do not stand there and tell me the system worked." Detective Harlan raised a hand. "Let us all take a breath." He looked at Dominic. "What exactly are you proposing?" Dominic uncrossed his arms. "Temporary guardianship. I will provide housing, food, stability, everything she needs. I will make sure she goes to school, sees a doctor, attends counseling, follows whatever rules you want to put in place. Give me 30 days to prove I can do this right." Miss Prescott let out a sharp breath. "You are asking us to place a vulnerable minor in the home of someone with a criminal record." "A record from 15 years ago," Dominic said. "I did my time. I have been clean since Sophie was born. I own my house outright. I run a legitimate business. And I have kept my daughter safe and happy for 8 years without a single complaint from anyone. Until 3 nights ago," Miss Prescott pointed out. Dominic's eyes went cold. "3 nights ago was not my fault. That was someone settling a grudge from a life I left behind. And if Chloe had not been there, my daughter would be dead or worse. So think carefully before you use that night against me." The room went silent. Detective Harlan flipped a page in his notebook. "Chloe," he said, "if we were to consider this arrangement, is that something you would want?" Chloe looked up, surprised. "You are asking me?" "You are 13, the detective said, "old enough to have an opinion about where you live. So yeah, I am asking." Chloe glanced at Dominic, then back at the detective. "I do not want to go back to foster care," she said. "I know what that looks like. I would rather be on the streets." "That is not an option," Miss Prescott said firmly. "Then yeah," Chloe said louder this time. "If he is offering, I want to stay with him." Miss Prescott shook her head. "This is highly irregular." "So is a 13-year-old taking 3 bullets for a stranger's child," Detective Harlan said. He looked at Dominic. "But there are conditions, non-negotiable." "Name them," Dominic said. "First, you file for emergency foster certification today." "Not tomorrow, today." "Done." "Second, Chloe sees a counselor weekly, someone who specializes in trauma." "Fine." "Third, she enrolls in school within 2 weeks. She needs structure and people checking on her who are not you." "Agreed." "And fourth, if I get even a hint that this arrangement is not working or that Chloe is in any kind of danger, she goes back into state custody immediately." No arguments. "Understood." Miss Prescott looked between them. "Detective, this sets a precedent we may not want to establish." "She saved a child's life," the detective said quietly. "If we cannot bend the rules for that." Then what are we doing? She pressed her lips together but did not argue further. One more thing, the detective said to Chloe. Those men who shot you, they are still out there. We are working on identifying them. But until we do, you need to understand that you might be a target because you are a witness and because you got in their way. Dominic's expression darkened. She will be protected. I will make sure of it. Miss Prescott gathered her things. Fine. I will start the paperwork for emergency placement. But this is a 30-day review, Mr. Gallagher. 30 days. After that, we reassess. You have my card, she said to Chloe. If you ever feel unsafe, if anything feels wrong, you call me. Day or night. I hope this works out, she said at the door. Her tone suggested she doubted it would. Then she was gone. The detective lingered. And if you hear anything about who those men were or who sent them, you call me, he said to Dominic. Do not handle it yourself. Dominic's silence was answer enough. Just try to keep her alive long enough for me to close this case, the detective said. Then he followed Miss Prescott out. Marcus exhaled slowly in the suddenly quiet room. Did that really just happen? Chloe asked. Yeah, Dominic said, sinking back into the chair. It did. The door opened again and Sophie peeked inside. Are you staying with us? She asked. Chloe glanced at Dominic, who nodded. Yeah, Chloe said quietly. I think so. Sophie's face lit up like sunrise. Does that mean you are my sister now? She asked. I do not know. Maybe, I think it does, Sophie decided, because sisters protect each other, and you protected me. So now I am going to protect you too. I am glad you are staying, she whispered, leaning carefully against Chloe's uninjured side. I was scared you would leave. I am not going anywhere, Chloe said. And for the first time in 4 months, she actually meant it. 3 days later, Chloe was discharged from the hospital with a list of medications, follow-up appointments, and strict instructions not to lift anything heavier than a gallon of milk for at least 6 weeks. Dominic pulled his truck up to the front entrance. Sophie bounced in the passenger seat, waving through the window with both hands. A nurse wheeled Chloe out in a wheelchair over her protests, and Dominic helped her into the back seat with a gentleness that did not match the rough edges of his appearance. They drove through the city in relative silence, Sophie filling the space with a running commentary about the room she had prepared. Chloe watched the streets roll past, the same streets she had walked 4 months hungry and invisible, and felt the strangest sense of displacement, like she was watching her old life from a window in someone else's house. They pulled into a quiet neighborhood on the north side. Dominic's house was a 2-story brick building with a porch that needed paint and a lawn that needed mowing and a fence with a gate that actually latched. It was not fancy, but it was solid, real, standing. Home, Sophie announced proudly. Chloe stared at the house. The words sat heavy in her chest like a stone she did not know whether to carry or put down. She was not sure she remembered what that was supposed to feel like. Inside, the house smelled like coffee and something faintly sweet. The living room had a couch with mismatched cushions, a television that had seen better days, and a bookshelf overflowing with novels, motorcycle magazines, and children's books. Photographs on the wall. Dominic and Sophie at a park, Sophie missing her 2 front teeth grinning at the camera. A woman Chloe did not recognize, young, beautiful, holding a baby. She did not ask about the woman. Some questions answered themselves. Sophie grabbed Chloe's hand with the exquisite carefulness of a child who understood that the person she was leading was held together with stitches and willpower. Your room is up here. The room was small but clean. A bed with a blue comforter, a dresser, a desk by the window, and on the bed a small army of stuffed animals arranged in what Sophie clearly believed was a welcoming formation, each one facing the door. Do you like it? Sophie asked. Her eyes were enormous. Yeah, Chloe managed. I really do. Good, because you are stuck with us now. After they left her to settle in, Chloe sat carefully on the edge of the bed. She looked around the room, then down at her hands, hands that had pressed against cold pavement, hands that had bled, hands that had been empty for so long, she had forgotten they could hold anything besides hunger and fear. They were not empty anymore. She lay back carefully staring at the ceiling. Outside the window, the sun was setting, painting the street in soft orange light. Somewhere down the block, kids were laughing. A dog barked. Normal sounds? Safe sounds? For the first time in 4 months, she was not counting exits. For the first time in longer than that, she did not fall asleep afraid. The first week in Dominic's house felt like walking through a dream Chloe kept expecting to wake up from. Every morning she opened her eyes to sunlight filtering through actual curtains instead of the gray pre-dawn glow of an alley. Every night she fell asleep in a bed that did not creak or smell like rust in old concrete. Meals happened at regular times with plates and forks and someone asking if she wanted seconds. It felt impossible, and yet it kept happening. Sophie appointed herself Chloe's personal guide to the house. She showed her which cabinet held the cereal, which drawer had the good spoons, which step on the staircase creaked the loudest. She talked constantly, asking questions about everything from her favorite color to whether she believed in ghosts. She did not ask about the streets or the bullets. She asked about the things that mattered to an 8-year-old, and somehow that was exactly what Chloe needed. Dominic was different, quieter. He watched more than he spoke, his presence steady in a way that felt protective rather than intrusive. He made breakfast most mornings and sat across from Chloe at the small kitchen table reading the news on his phone while Sophie chattered between bites. He did not push, did not ask Chloe to talk about things she was not ready to talk about. He was just there, consistent, present, like a wall you could lean against without worrying it would move. It felt like a family. And that terrified Chloe more than anything that had happened in that parking lot, because families could be taken away. She still hid food under her pillow at night, a granola bar, a piece of bread wrapped in a napkin, insurance against a hunger that might come back at any moment. She still woke at 3 in the morning, heart pounding, disoriented in the darkness, reaching for the ground before remembering she was in a bed. She still flinched when doors closed too hard, when voices rose too loud, when someone moved behind her without warning. Dominic noticed all of it. He never said a word about the food under the pillow. He simply made sure the pantry was always stocked and the kitchen was never locked. When she flinched at sudden sounds, he adjusted, closed doors softer, spoke in steady tones, made his footsteps heavier when he walked behind her so she would hear him coming. He was rewriting the rules of his own house around the shape of her fear, and he did it so quietly that Chloe almost did not notice. Almost. Chloe's first counseling session was on a Thursday afternoon. Dominic drove her to a small office building near the lake where a woman named Dr. Whitfield waited. The office smelled like chamomile and old books. 2 armchairs faced each other beside a window that overlooked a courtyard where pigeons gathered on the ledge. Dr. Whitfield was in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She did not shake Chloe's hand. She simply gestured to the armchair and said, "Sit wherever you are comfortable. There are no wrong answers in here." They did not talk about the shooting. Not that first session. Dr. Whitfield asked about simple things, what Chloe liked to eat, whether she preferred mornings or evenings, what her favorite subject in school had been. Small questions designed to map the terrain before venturing into the difficult country underneath. At the end of the hour, Dr. Whitfield said something that stuck with Chloe long after she left. "You have spent a very long time protecting yourself, and you have done an extraordinary job of it. But at some point, the walls we build to keep danger out also keep everything else out too. Warmth, trust, the feeling of being safe enough to stop watching the door. My job is not to tear those walls down. My job is to help you build windows." Chloe thought about that on the ride home, about walls and windows, about the difference between being protected and being trapped. On the 8th day, Chloe woke to the sound of voices downstairs, not angry but serious. She pulled on the hoodie Dominic had bought her and made her way carefully down the stairs. In the kitchen, Dominic stood with his back to the counter, arms crossed, talking to a man Chloe had not seen before. The man wore a leather cut with patches across the chest and back. Gray streaked through his beard. His eyes flicked to Chloe when she entered. Assessing, measuring. "This her?" the man asked. "Yeah," Dominic said. "Chloe, this is Briggs. He is my VP, second in command." Briggs gave a single nod. "Heard a lot about you, kid. You have got guts. Stupid guts, maybe, but guts." Briggs turned back to Dominic and his expression shifted. Harder, more urgent. "Word is spreading," he said, "about the kid, about what happened. People are asking questions. Some of them are not friendly questions." Dominic's jaw tightened. "Let them ask. I am serious, Dom. You brought her into your house. That makes her part of this, whether you meant it to or not. The people who came after you, they are going to hear about her. They are going to wonder if she saw something, heard something, knows something, and Victor Strand, does not leave loose ends. The name landed in the kitchen like a dropped blade. Victor Strand. Chloe had heard it that night in the parking lot. Now hearing it again in the warmth of this kitchen, the name carried a weight that made the air feel thinner. What do we know? Dominic asked. Strand has been running operations on the south side for the last 2 years, Briggs said. Drugs, weapons. He has been building power since you left, and he has not forgotten that you walked away without his blessing. That night at the garage was his way of sending a message. Pay what you owe, or watch your daughter pay for you, and now he knows the message got interrupted by a 13-year-old girl, and he is not happy about it. Word from inside is that he wants the situation cleaned up. All of it. Chloe's stomach twisted into a knot so tight she could feel it in her throat. Cleaned up, she understood what that meant. We keep eyes on the house, Briggs said, around the clock. We make sure people know she is under your protection, under the club's protection. But we also need to find out exactly what Strand is planning before he plans it. I will know more in a few days. He glanced at Chloe one more time. Something that might have been concern flickered behind the hard edges. You did good, kid. Sophie is lucky you were there. We all are. Then he was gone. Chloe stood frozen in the kitchen doorway. Dominic turned, saw the look on her face, and pulled out a chair at the table. Come here, sit down. He poured 2 mugs of coffee and sat down across from her. You heard all that, he said. Yeah, and you are scared. Chloe nodded. I am not going to lie to you, Dominic said. There are people out there who might see you as a problem, as something they need to deal with. And yeah, that is real. But here is the other thing that is real, he continued. You are not alone anymore. You have got me. You have got Sophie. You have got my brothers. And we do not let our people get hurt. I did not mean to drag you into more trouble, Chloe said quietly. You did not drag me into anything, Dominic said. You saved my daughter. Everything else is just noise I am going to handle. Your job is to heal, go to school and be a kid. Let me worry about the rest. 2 weeks after moving in, Chloe started school. Lincoln Park Middle School was a 3-story brick building surrounded by a chain-link fence. Banners hung from the entrance. Students streamed through the front doors in clusters, laughing, shouting, moving with the easy confidence of people who belonged somewhere and knew it. Chloe stood on the sidewalk and felt like she was looking at a foreign country through a window she could not open. The first 3 periods were fine: math, English, biology. She kept her head down, took notes, answered when called on, and otherwise made herself invisible. The academic material was not hard. Her mother had been a reader, had insisted on homework being finished before anything else. Chloe had always been smart, smart enough to keep up, smart enough to know that intelligence was not enough to protect you from anything that mattered. The trouble started at lunch. She was sitting alone at a table near the window when 3 girls approached. The leader was taller than Chloe, with dark hair pulled into a high ponytail and practiced confidence. You are the new girl, right? She said, sliding into the seat across from Chloe. I heard you are living with some biker dude. Like not your dad, just some random guy. I also heard you were homeless. Like actually sleeping on the street homeless. The cafeteria noise seemed to dim around them. That is not really your business, Chloe said. The girl smiled. It was not a kind smile. So it is true. Wow, that is actually kind of sad. Do you still smell like a dumpster? Or did the biker guy at least buy you soap? Laughter from the 2 girls beside her. Sharp, practiced. Something hot and tight coiled in Chloe's chest. Anger, raw, immediate, and dangerously close to the surface. She stood up. Say that again. The girl blinked. Relax, homeless girl. I was just asking a question. Chloe did not remember deciding to move. One moment she was standing behind her chair, and the next she had crossed the space and shoved the girl so hard she toppled backward off the bench. What followed was loud and fast and ugly. By the time 2 teachers pulled them apart, Chloe had a split lip and the other girl had a bruised eye. She sat in the principal's office for 2 hours waiting for the call that would end everything. The call to Miss Prescott. The call that would prove the system had been right about her all along. Dominic arrived 40 minutes after the school called him. He walked into the office, listened to the whole story without interrupting, and then turned to Chloe. He did not yell. He did not lecture. He did not look at her with disappointment. He looked at her with understanding. We will talk about this at home, he said. Then he turned to the principal. She will serve whatever consequence you decide is fair. But this girl has been through things that would break most adults. She is not a problem. She is figuring out how to exist in a world that has not been kind to her. Give her time. The principal agreed to a 3-day in-school suspension. Dominic drove them to a park near the lake. He killed the engine and sat for a moment watching the water. When I was 16, he said I broke a kid's jaw in a parking lot because he said something about my mother. Cost me 2 months in juvenile detention and a record that followed me for years. I am not telling you that because I think it was okay, Dominic continued. I am telling you because I understand why you did what you did. Someone came at you in a place where you felt vulnerable and you reacted the way the streets taught you to react, with force. Because on the streets, force is the only language that keeps you safe. But you are not on the streets anymore, Chloe. And the skills that kept you alive out there are going to destroy you in here. Fighting is not strength, not in this world. Knowing when to walk away, that is strength. She called me a dumpster kid, Chloe said. And she is wrong, Dominic said simply. But you already knew that. You did not need to hit her to prove it. You just needed to believe it. They sat in the car for a while longer, watching the water, saying nothing. It was the closest thing to a father-daughter moment Chloe had ever experienced, and it terrified her almost as much as the bullets had. Things got harder before they got easier. 3 weeks after the school incident, Miss Prescott returned for her first official check-in. She arrived unannounced, clipboard in hand, expression sharp enough to cut glass. She walked through the house, slowly taking notes on everything. She checked Chloe's room, the kitchen, the schedule Dominic had pinned to the fridge. Finally, she sat down with Chloe alone in the living room. How are you adjusting? Better than I have been in a long time, Chloe admitted. Maybe ever. Miss Prescott studied her. I heard about the incident at school, a physical altercation in your 3rd week. That concerns me. It was one fight. A girl was saying things about me. I should not have hit her. I know that. I have also been informed that there may be ongoing safety concerns related to the men involved in the original shooting, that the threat has not been fully resolved. Chloe's hands tightened on her knees. I am safe here. Miss Prescott leaned forward. Chloe, I need you to understand something. I approve this placement against my better judgment, against protocol. But my job is not to make you comfortable. My job is to make sure you are safe. And right now I have a child in a home with an ex-felon in a neighborhood where known associates visit regularly who has already been involved in a violent altercation at school. That is 3 red flags in 30 days. Chloe felt the floor tilting beneath her. Please, she said, and the word came out before she could stop it. Please do not take this away from me. This is the first time I have felt safe since my mom died. He takes care of me. Sophie needs me. I need them. Please. Something shifted in Miss Prescott's expression. Not much, just enough. I am extending the placement for another 30 days, she said. But I am putting you on notice. One more incident, one more red flag, and I will have no choice but to remove you. After Miss Prescott left, Dominic came back into the living room. We are on thin ice, Chloe said. I know, Dominic replied. So we do not fall through. The threat from Victor Strand did not arrive as a bomb or a bullet. It arrived as a dark blue sedan with tinted windows that appeared near Sophie's school on a Wednesday afternoon. Sophie mentioned it casually at dinner. There was a car outside school today, she said, swirling spaghetti around her fork. A blue one, Baron. It was there when I went in and it was there when I came out. It just sat there. Dominic's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Chloe saw his knuckles go white around the handle. What kind of car? He asked, his voice carefully level. Blue. Like dark blue. With black windows. I could not see inside. Dominic set his fork down. Did it follow you? Did anyone get out? No, Sophie said, confused by the sudden intensity. It just sat there. Why is it bad? No, baby, it is fine. Just eat your dinner. But his eyes met Chloe's across the table, and in that look she saw everything he was not saying. Fear, fury, the cold calculation of a man who had lived a life where dark cars with tinted windows meant only one thing. After Sophie went to bed, Dominic made 3 phone calls. By midnight, 2 members of the club were parked outside the house in a black truck, and another was stationed near Sophie's school. Dominic sat across from Chloe at the kitchen table, his hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had gone cold. This is because of me, Chloe said quietly. Dominic looked up. This. The car outside Sophie's school. Strand coming after you. It is because I was there that night. Because I saw their faces. And as long as I am here, Sophie is in danger too. That is not true. It is, and you know it. Dominic stared at her. Strand was coming after my family no matter what. You did not cause this, you interrupted it. There is a difference. And I am not going to let you convince yourself that you are the reason my daughter is in danger. You are the reason my daughter is alive. But if I leave Chloe started, you are not leaving, Dominic said. End of discussion. If I go back to the streets, Strand has no reason to come here anymore. Sophie would be safe. Listen to me, Dominic said. Very carefully. You are not a problem that needs to be removed. You are not a liability. You are not expendable. You are a kid who deserves to be safe, and I am going to make sure you are. All three of us. Together. Running does not fix this. It just means you are alone again. And I am not letting that happen. Chloe wanted to argue, but Sophie had left a drawing on her desk that afternoon. A picture of three people standing in front of a house holding hands. Above them in wobbly letters, it said, "My family." And the tall figure in the middle with long hair was labeled Chloe. She did not say anything else that night. She sat with Dominic in the quiet kitchen while the coffee went cold and the clock ticked past midnight. She sat with the weight of being cared about, which was heavier than she expected. Heavier than being alone. Heavier than hunger or cold or the sound of gunshots in a parking lot. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the things worth carrying were supposed to be heavy. She went to bed at 1 in the morning but did not sleep. She lay in the dark staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle around her. And she made a decision. Not the one Dominic wanted her to make. Not the one Sophie would understand. She waited until the house was silent, until Dominic's footsteps had stopped and the light under his door had gone dark. Then she got up. She dressed in the dark. Jeans, the hoodie Dominic had bought her, the sneakers that no longer had holes. She moved quietly the way the streets had taught her, avoiding the step that creaked, turning the doorknob slowly so the latch did not click. She stopped outside Sophie's room, pressed her hand flat against the door, stood there for 30 seconds that felt like 30 years listening to the soft sound of an 8-year-old breathing in her sleep. "I am sorry," Chloe whispered. So quietly the words barely existed. "I am doing this for you. Both of you." She went downstairs, found a piece of paper on the kitchen counter, wrote 3 sentences in handwriting that shook more than she wanted it to. "I am sorry. I do not want Sophie to get hurt because of me. Please tell her I did not want to leave." She set the note on the table, weighting it down with the coffee mug Sophie had picked out at a thrift store and wrapped in tissue paper like it was made of gold. The one that said, "World's okayest human." Then she opened the back door, slipped into the yard, climbed the fence, and dropped into the alley on the other side. The cold hit her immediately. December in Chicago was not forgiving. The air cut through her hoodie like it was made of paper. Her breath came out in white clouds that dissolved into the darkness. She walked fast, head down, hood up, moving through side streets and alleys she knew by heart. Away from the house, away from the warm bed and the drawings on the wall and the small, fierce girl who had decided they were sisters. Every step felt like tearing something, like pulling stitches out of a wound that had just started to close. But she kept walking, because Chloe Mercer had spent her whole life learning one lesson, and she had learned it so well it was written into her bones. The people who stayed near her got hurt. Her mother had stayed, and cancer had taken her. Dominic had opened his door, and now his daughter was being watched by men who did not care about collateral damage. The pattern was clear. The math was simple. Remove herself from the equation, and the people she cared about would be safe. She told herself this was the right thing, the brave thing, the thing a person who truly loves someone would do. She almost believed it. Dominic found the note at 5:30 in the morning. He had come downstairs to start coffee, and his hand landed on the piece of paper where his mug should have been. He read it once, read it again. Then he was moving, taking the stairs 3 at a time, pushing open Chloe's door to find an empty bed with the covers pulled back and the hoodie gone from the hook. He checked every room, called Briggs, called the 2 men in the truck out front who had not seen her leave and whose faces went pale when they understood what that meant. Then he woke Sophie. "Sophie, baby, wake up. I need to tell you something." Sophie blinked awake. "What is it, Daddy? Chloe is gone." She left during the night. The silence that followed was worse than any sound Dominic had ever heard. Worse than gunshots. Worse than sirens. Sophie's face crumpled. All at once, like a building collapsing from the foundation up. No, she said. No. She promised. She said she was not going anywhere. She promised me, Daddy. I know, baby. You said she was staying. You promised too. You said she was family. Family does not leave. Dominic pulled her into his arms and held her while she sobbed. I am going to find her, he said. I promise you, I am going to bring her home. He made the calls. Briggs mobilized every member of the club. They split the city into grids covering the shelters, the underpasses, the loading docks, the alleys where Chloe had told him she used to look for food. Detective Harlan was notified. Miss Prescott was informed, and her response was exactly what Dominic expected. I told you this would happen. I am initiating removal proceedings. Dominic hung up on her. He drove through the city for hours, scanning every sidewalk, every bus stop, every shadow that might be a girl in a hoodie, walking away from the first people who had ever told her she mattered. He did not find her. Nobody did, because Chloe Mercer had spent 117 nights learning how to disappear. And she was very, very good at it. Chloe spent the first night back on the streets under a loading dock she remembered from before. The same loading dock where this whole story had started. The concrete was colder than she remembered. The wind cut deeper. The darkness pressed in from every side with a weight it had not carried before because now she knew what warmth felt like. She did not sleep. She lay on the concrete and tried not to think about Sophie's face when she found out. Tried not to think about the drawing on the wall. My family. Tried not to think about the look Dominic would have when he read the note. She told herself she had done the right thing. The concrete did not argue. The city just kept moving around her, indifferent the way it always had been. But everything felt different now. The concrete felt harder. The cold felt colder. The silence felt louder. Because now she had something to compare it to. Now she knew what Sophie's laugh sounded like echoing through a warm kitchen. She knew what it felt like to have someone ask if she wanted seconds. She knew the weight of a small hand reaching for hers in the dark during a scary movie. On the second morning, she passed a mother and daughter walking hand in hand toward a bus stop. The girl was about Sophie's age, wearing a pink scarf. Chloe watched them and felt something crack inside her chest that had nothing to do with the healing bullet wounds. She almost turned around, almost walked back to the house, and knocked on the door and said she was sorry. But then she remembered the dark blue sedan outside Sophie's school, and the weight of being the reason a little girl with a butterfly jacket could not walk to school without being watched by men who wanted to hurt her. So she kept walking. She almost believed she was doing the right thing until the afternoon of the second day when a black SUV pulled up beside her on a street she should not have been walking down, and two men stepped out with the kind of calm efficiency that told her everything she needed to know before they said a single word. Victor Strand sent his regards. A hand closed around her arm. Something hard pressed against her ribs through her jacket. A gun, small, cold even through the fabric. Walk, the man said, quietly. Chloe walked, and the city watched her disappear one more time, the way it always did, because invisible girls do not make sounds when they vanish, and nobody was counting the empty spaces they leave behind. Nobody except a biker with tattoos and a broken promise, and an 8-year-old girl who was still waiting by the window for her sister to come home. The warehouse smelled like rust and diesel, and the kind of cold that seeps into concrete and never leaves. Chloe sat on the floor with her back against a steel support beam, her wrists bound behind her with zip ties that bit into her skin every time she shifted. The space was cavernous and dim, lit by a few industrial lights hanging from chains above. Shipping containers lined the far wall, stacked too high. Somewhere above, pigeons rustled in the rafters. She had been here for hours. They had put a hood over her head in the SUV and driven for what felt like 40 minutes. When the hood came off, she was here. Wherever here was. Two men guarded the entrance. Both wore dark jackets and the blank professional expressions of people who had done this kind of work enough times that it no longer required thought. They did not speak to her, did not look at her. She was cargo. Chloe tested the zip ties for the third time, twisting her wrists, slowly feeling for any give in the plastic. There was none. The edges were already cutting shallow grooves into her skin. She forced herself to breathe. Slow, controlled. The way Dr. Whitfield had taught her during their sessions. In through the nose, 4 counts. Hold 4-4. Out through the mouth, 4 counts. She had thought it was pointless at the time. But now sitting on a warehouse floor with her hands bound and her heart racing, those 4 counts were the only thing keeping her from screaming. Think, she told herself. You have survived worse than this. You have survived 4 months on streets that kill grown men. You have survived 3 bullets. You can survive a warehouse and 2 men who are not even looking at you. She scanned the space. The main entrance was 30 feet ahead, a rolling metal door half raised showing a sliver of gray daylight. To her left, a corridor led deeper into the warehouse. To her right, a staircase climbed to a metal catwalk along the upper level. Behind her, bolted to the support beam, was a fire extinguisher bracket. The extinguisher itself was gone, but the bracket remained, a piece of bent metal with a sharp edge where the mounting bolt had corroded and broken away. Chloe shifted her weight, sliding her bound wrists down until they caught against the bracket's edge. She began working the zip tie against the metal, slowly, carefully. The angle was awkward, and every motion sent bolts of pain through her still healing shoulder. But pain was old territory. She knew how to live inside it and keep moving. The plastic was thick, resistant, but the metal was sharp, and Chloe was patient in the way that only someone who had spent months waiting for nothing could be patient. She worked the tie back and forth, her eyes fixed on the guards. One was on his phone. The other had closed his eyes, head tilted back against a container. Neither considered a 13-year-old girl a threat worth staying awake for. Good. Let them underestimate her. People had been underestimating her for her entire life, and every single one of them had been wrong. The zip tie weakened, a slight give, a softening where the plastic had started to fray. She kept going faster now, but still controlled. The tie snapped. The sound was small. Chloe kept her arms behind her back, maintaining the illusion. Her hands trembled. Adrenaline flooded through her bloodstream like electricity. She waited, measured the guards' patterns, the intervals between when they looked in her direction and when they did not. The one on the phone stood up, stretched, and walked toward the corridor. A bathroom break. For the next 2 to 5 minutes, there was 1 guard instead of 2. The remaining guard had his eyes closed. His breathing had deepened into the rhythm of someone drifting towards sleep. Chloe moved, not running. Running made noise. She rose in one fluid motion, knees absorbing the shift in weight, sneakers silent on the concrete. She crossed the space between the beam and the row of containers in 7 steps. She reached the containers and pressed her back against the cold metal. The guard had not moved. She was 15 feet from the main entrance. She could make it. She was fast, even injured, but she did not run for the door. Not yet. Because on the overturned crate where the guard had been sitting next to a half-empty water bottle sat a cell phone. Unlocked. Screen still glowing. Chloe's mind raced. She could run, disappear into the city the way she always had. But disappearing meant Strand was still out there. Still free. Still a threat to Dominic and Sophie. Running solved her problem, but not theirs. Or she could take 30 seconds she did not have and do something that might solve all of it. She moved toward the crate, staying low. She reached the phone and picked it up. The screen showed a text message chain, an address she recognized, the warehouse address, and above it a message from a contact listed only as V. Bringing the girl was smart. Gallagher will come. Make sure he comes alone. We finish this tonight. Chloe's thumbs moved fast. She opened the phone's recent calls, scrolled past names that meant nothing, and found what she was looking for. A number that had called this phone 6 times in the last 2 days. The number she had seen on Dominic's caller ID during one of his late-night conversations with Detective Harlan. She dialed. The phone rang twice. "Harlan, this is Chloe Mercer," she whispered. "I have been taken. I am in a warehouse." She read the address from the text chain. "Strand is coming. He is using me to lure Dominic here. You need to come now. Bring everyone." 1 second of silence. 2. "Are you hurt?" "No, but there are guards. At least 2. Maybe more coming. Stay hidden. Do not try to run. We are on our way." Chloe ended the call, erased it from the phone's history, and placed the phone back on the crate exactly where it had been. Same angle, same position. Then she moved back to the support beam, sat down, looped the broken zip tie around her wrists, and waited. Her heart was pounding so hard, she was certain the guard could hear it. But he did not stir. The second guard returned and resumed his position. Chloe sat still, breathed, counted the seconds. She had done everything she could. The rest was out of her hands. But for the first time in her life, out of her hands did not mean alone. Dominic received the call from Detective Harlan at 4:17 in the afternoon. He was in his truck driving through the industrial district for the third time that day when the phone rang. "We found her," Harlan said. "Or rather, she found us. She called from a guard's phone, gave us the address. Strand is planning to use her as bait to draw you in tonight." Dominic's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Give me the address. I am giving you something better," Harlan said. "I am giving you a plan, and you are going to follow it. Not your plan, mine." Every instinct in Dominic screamed at him to drive to that warehouse alone, to handle this the way he had handled things his entire life before Sophie was born. But Briggs's voice echoed in his memory. "If you get arrested, you lose both of them, Sophie and Chloe." And Sophie's voice, "You promised Daddy." "What is the plan?" Dominic asked. Harlan laid it out. SWAT was being mobilized. Plainclothes officers would establish a perimeter. Dominic and Briggs would approach from the front, visible expected, giving Strand the audience he wanted, while the tactical team moved into position from three sides. "And Chloe?" Dominic asked. "She is smart," Harlan said, and there was something in his voice that sounded almost like admiration. "She got herself to a phone, called us, gave us the address, and put the phone back without anyone noticing. She is not sitting in there waiting to be rescued. She is buying us time. Your job is to not waste it." Dominic arrived at the staging area 20 minutes later. Briggs was already there along with four other members of the club parked in a row behind an unmarked police van. The tension between the bikers and the officers was palpable. Two groups who had spent decades on opposite sides of the same line, now standing shoulder to shoulder because a 13-year-old girl had made them all care about the same thing. Harlan briefed them. Entry points, timing, signals. "One thing," Dominic said. "I go in first." "Absolutely not. Strand is expecting me. If I do not walk through that door, he will know something is wrong. And if he knows something is wrong, Chloe pays for it." Harlan stared at him for a long moment, then nodded. "You walk in, you keep him talking. You do not escalate. The moment we breach, you get down and stay down." Briggs clapped a hand on his shoulder. "Bring her home, brother." Dominic walked toward the warehouse. The rolling door was fully raised. Light spilled from inside. Dominic stopped at the threshold, took a breath, thought of Sophie at home clutching the stuffed bear she had taken back because it still smelled like Chloe. Thought of Chloe on the other side of this door, bound and bruised and still fighting. Then he walked in. In the center of the space, Victor Strand stood waiting. He was not what Dominic had expected. Not physically imposing. Average height, lean with thinning hair, combed neatly, and wire-rimmed glasses. He wore a dark overcoat and polished shoes and stood with his hands clasped behind his back. He looked more like an accountant than a crime boss. That was what made him dangerous. He did not enjoy hurting people. He simply did not care whether he did or not, as long as the numbers balanced. Four men flanked him, armed, alert. And behind Strand, still sitting against the support beam, was Chloe. Her face was pale. A bruise darkened her left cheek. But her eyes were open and sharp, tracking everything in the room. She saw Dominic, and something flickered across her face. Relief, fear, guilt, all compressed into a single glance that lasted less than a second. "I am here," Dominic said. "Let her go." Strand regarded him with detached interest. "Dominic, it has been a long time. And you look like a man who kidnaps children," Dominic replied. "Let the girl go. This is between us." Strand smiled. It did not reach his eyes. "You carried skills, knowledge, connections that belong to the organization. You use them to build your business, your comfortable life. That is company property, and the interest has been compounding for 8 years." Dominic's eyes flicked to Chloe. She met his gaze for 1 second. In that second, she moved her right hand slightly from behind her back. Free. She showed him. Her hands were free. She was ready. Dominic looked back at Strand and kept his expression neutral. "Say what you need to say," he said, stalling, buying the seconds Harlan needed. Strand began talking about numbers. about percentages, about the organizational structure he had built over the past decade. Dominic listened, nodded at the right moments, asked questions that required longer answers. He watched the shadows at the edge of the warehouse looking for movement. 2 minutes passed. 3, 4. Then he saw it. A flash of light from the upper windows. Twice. The signal. Dominic dropped to the floor. The world exploded. The SWAT team breached from 3 directions simultaneously. The rolling door burst open as officers poured through. The side entrance erupted inward. The catwalk filled with figures moving fast in low laser sights, cutting red lines through the dusty air. Strand's men reacted, but they were outmanned and outflanked. 2 dropped their weapons immediately. The 3rd tried to run and was tackled. The 4th raised his gun and was taken down with a single shot to the shoulder. Strand himself did not move. He stood in the center and watched his empire collapse with the same detached expression he had worn throughout. He simply extended his hands, wrists together, waiting for the handcuffs. Dominic was on his feet before the breach was fully complete. He crossed the floor in seconds and dropped to his knees beside Chloe. Her hands were already free. She was already moving. But when his arms closed around her, she stopped. She stopped running. She stopped calculating. She stopped being invisible. She just held on. "I am sorry," she said, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "I thought if I left you and Sophie would be safe. I thought I was protecting you." Dominic's arms tightened around her. "Do not ever do that again," he said. "You do not get to protect us by destroying yourself. That is not how this works." Chloe pulled back enough to look at him. Her eyes were wet. Her face was bruised. But behind all of it, there was something else. Something that had not been there 4 months ago on a loading dock on the south side of Chicago. Certainty. "I want to come home," she said. "You are home," Dominic said. "You have been home since the moment you stepped between my daughter and a bullet. You just did not know it yet. Detective Harlan found them like that, kneeling on the warehouse floor, holding on to each other. She called us," Harlan said. "Got to a guard's phone, dialed my number, gave us the location, and put the phone back. Without her, we would not have found this place until it was too late. Strand is in custody," Harlan continued, "along with 4 of his people. Between the kidnapping, the original shooting, and what we pulled from their phones tonight, we are looking at federal charges. He is not getting out anytime soon." And Chloe, Dominic asked. "I called Miss Prescott on the way here," Harlan said. "Told her exactly what happened. Told her that your kid just helped take down a criminal operation that my department has been trying to crack for 2 years. And I told her that if she tries to remove Chloe from your custody after tonight, she is going to have to go through me, my captain, and a judge who is going to hear the full story." He looked at Chloe. "That is what you did tonight. You did not just escape. You made sure the people who were threatening your family could never do it again. Take her home," he said to Dominic, "and I mean that in every sense of the word." The drive home was quiet. Chloe sat in the passenger seat, wrapped in a blanket a paramedic had given her. The city passed outside the windows in streaks of light and shadow. Storefronts closing for the night. Street lamps flickering on one by one. Dominic drove with one hand on the wheel. The other rested on the center console, close enough to reach for if she needed it. He did not fill the silence with words. He just drove steady and sure, the way he did everything. Chloe watched the streets and thought about all the nights she had walked them alone, all the doorways she had slept in, and all the mornings she had woken to cold and hunger, and the crushing certainty that no one in the world was thinking about her. Someone was thinking about her now. 2 someones. One who drove through the city for hours searching, and one who waited by a window refusing to believe her sister would not come back. Chloe reached across the console and put her hand on Dominic's arm. She did not say anything. He glanced at her, nodded once, and kept driving. When they pulled into the driveway, the porch light was on. The front door opened before Dominic had killed the engine, and Sophie appeared in the doorway, wearing pajamas and the expression of someone who had been waiting so long that waiting had become a permanent state. She did not wait for Chloe to get out of the truck. She ran across the yard in bare feet, ignoring the cold, ignoring the wet grass, ignoring everything except the person she had been waiting for. "You came back," Sophie whispered, her face pressed against Chloe's stomach. "You came back. You came back. You came back. I came back," Chloe said. "I am sorry I left. I am so sorry, Sophie." Sophie pulled back with eyes that were red and swollen and fierce. Do not ever leave again. Promise me. A real promise, not a pretend one. Chloe knelt down so they were face to face. I promise. A real promise. I am not going anywhere ever again. Sophie studied her face for a long moment, searching for the truth the way only children can. Whatever she found must have been enough because she nodded once, then wrapped her arms around Chloe's neck and held on. Dominic stood beside the truck watching them. Some moments did not need words. They just needed witnesses. The guardianship hearing took place 6 weeks later in a courthouse on Michigan Avenue. Chloe wore a dress that Sophie had helped her pick out. Dark blue with small white flowers along the hem. Sophie wore a matching ribbon in her hair because sisters match on important days. The courtroom was smaller than Chloe expected. A handful of people in the gallery. Briggs in a clean button-down shirt that looked like it was causing him physical pain. Dr. Whitfield, who had written a letter to the court. And Miss Prescott, tablet on her lap, expression unreadable. Detective Harlan was the first to testify. He described the night of the shooting. The bravery of a girl who ran toward gunfire. The kidnapping. The phone call from inside the warehouse that led to Strand's arrest. In 23 years of law enforcement, he said, I have never encountered a young person with this kind of courage. This family is unconventional, but it is real, and it is exactly what this child deserves. Then the judge called Miss Prescott. Chloe braced herself for opposition. Miss Prescott smoothed her jacket and walked to the front of the courtroom. She opened her tablet, looked at the screen, then closed it without reading from it. Your Honor, she said, I have spent 22 years in Child Protective Services. I have overseen hundreds of placements. I have learned to trust data over instinct, protocol over emotion. She paused, looked at Chloe. When this case first came across my desk, every metric told me it was a mistake. An ex-felon with gang affiliations, a minor with a history of running, an unsafe environment. By every standard I used to evaluate placements, this should have failed. Another pause. It did not fail, she said. And the reason it did not fail is sitting right there. She pointed at Chloe. This girl has shown more resilience, more courage, and more capacity for love than any child I have encountered in 2 decades of service. She took 3 bullets for a stranger's daughter. She walked away from the first stable home she had ever known because she believed her presence was putting that family in danger. And when she was kidnapped, she did not wait to be rescued. She rescued herself and helped law enforcement arrest the people responsible. Miss Prescott's voice wavered slightly. I came here today prepared to recommend continued monitoring, but I am standing here instead to say that I was wrong. Dominic Gallagher is not a perfect guardian. This is not a perfect home. But perfection has never been the standard. Safety, stability, and love are the standard. And by those measures, this placement is the best outcome I could have hoped for. I recommend permanent guardianship without reservation. Sophie tugged on Chloe's sleeve. What does permanent mean, she whispered. It means forever, Chloe whispered back. Sophie's face broke into the biggest smile Chloe had ever seen. The judge reviewed the file, asked Dominic about his plans, asked Chloe if this was what she wanted. Chloe said she had never been more sure of anything in her life. The gavel came down at 11:47 on a Tuesday morning in February. Granted, permanent guardianship of Chloe Mercer is hereby awarded to Dominic Gallagher, effective immediately. Sophie screamed so loud the bailiff flinched. She launched herself at Chloe, then at Dominic, then back at Chloe, bouncing between them like a small blonde pinball made of pure joy. Briggs stood in the back and clapped once hard like a thunderclap, and then did something Chloe had never seen him do before. He smiled. Dominic pulled Chloe into a hug. Tight, solid, welcome to the family, he said. For real this time. 3 months later, on a morning in late May when the trees along the street had exploded into green and the air smelled like cut grass and warm pavement, Chloe stood in the kitchen making pancakes. Sophie sat at the table drawing. Colored pencils spread across the table in a rainbow of disorder. Her tongue poked out of the corner of her mouth the way it always did when she was concentrating. Dominic walked in from the garage, wiping his hands on a rag. He stopped in the doorway and watched them for a moment. The girl at the stove, the girl at the table, his girls, both of them. Mail came, he said, tossing an envelope on the counter. Something official. Chloe wiped her hands and picked up the envelope, thick cream-colored from the county clerk's office. She opened it carefully and pulled out a single sheet of paper. She read it once, then again, then a third time. It was the finalized adoption certificate, not just guardianship, adoption. Dominic had filed the paperwork 2 months ago without telling her, had gone through the process quietly without fanfare. The certificate read Chloe Mercer Gallagher. She stared at the name, her name, a new name that contained her old one inside it like a seed inside a fruit. Dominic leaned against the counter. I wanted it to be official, he said. Not just guardianship, not just temporary, all the way. Chloe looked up at him, her vision blurred, not from pain, not from fear. You gave me your name, she said. You gave me my daughter back, Dominic replied. Seemed like a fair trade. Sophie looked up from her drawing. What is happening? Why is Chloe crying? Is it bad crying or good crying? Good crying, Chloe managed. Sophie's eyes widened. Did the paper say what I think it says? Chloe held it up. Sophie read it slowly. Then her face transformed into something luminous. Gallagher, she said. Like me. Chloe Gallagher. We have the same name now. Yeah, we do. Sophie launched out of her chair, scattering colored pencils across the floor, and threw her arms around Chloe's waist. I told you, she said. I told you the first day. I said you were my sister. And now it is real. It is on paper. Nobody can take it back. Nobody can take it back, Chloe confirmed. She held Sophie tight and looked over her head at Dominic, who was standing in the doorway of his kitchen with grease on his hands and something in his eyes that looked like a man who had finally finished building something he had been working on his whole life. Thank you, Chloe said. For everything. Dominic shook his head. You do not owe me thanks. You owe me pancakes. Those are burning. Chloe spun around. The pancakes were in fact burning. She grabbed the spatula and rescued them laughing, while Sophie declared that she liked her pancakes crispy anyway, and Dominic poured coffee into 3 mugs, one for him, one for Chloe, and one for Sophie that was mostly milk with a tablespoon of coffee so she could feel included. They sat at the kitchen table together. The morning sun came through the window and made squares of light on the floor. The house smelled like coffee and pancakes in the particular warmth that comes from a place where people want to be. Chloe looked at her hands. Hands that had pressed against cold pavement. Hands that had bled. Hands that had been empty for so long, she had forgotten they could hold anything besides hunger and fear. They were holding a fork now, and a glass of orange juice, and the small, certain hand of an 8-year-old girl who had decided on a night that smelled like gunpowder and blood that they were sisters. They were not empty anymore. Outside the window, the street was alive with the sounds of a neighborhood waking up. Sprinklers hissing on lawns, a dog barking at a squirrel, children riding bikes on the sidewalk, their laughter carrying on the warm air like music that nobody had to pay for. Chloe Mercer Gallagher had spent 117 nights learning how to disappear. She had spent every night since learning something harder, something that required more courage than running toward gunfire, something that the streets could never teach and the system could never provide, and that no amount of survival instinct could replace. She had learned how to stay. And in staying, she had found the things she had stopped believing existed on a cold November night under a loading dock on Chicago's South Side. She had found home. Not a building, not an address, not a name on a mailbox or a key that fit a lock. Home was a man with tattoos and a record and a heart big enough to hold a stranger's broken pieces. Home was an 8-year-old girl with a butterfly jacket and light-up sneakers who had looked at a bleeding broken kid on a parking lot floor and decided she was worth keeping. Home was a table with 3 chairs and pancakes burning on the stove and coffee in a mug that said, "World's okayest human." Home was the choice to stay when every instinct said run. And Chloe had made that choice. Not once. Not on a single brave night in a parking lot full of guns and screaming. She made it every morning when she opened her eyes in a room with curtains that had stars on them. She made it every evening when she sat at a table where someone asked how her day was and actually wanted to know. She made it every night when she closed her eyes and did not count the exits. She made it now sitting in a kitchen full of sunlight, holding the hand of a girl who called her sister, looking at a man who called her daughter, eating pancakes that were slightly burned and absolutely perfect. She made it, and she would keep making it every single day for as long as the choice was hers. And it was, finally, irrevocably and without condition. It was hers.